and welcome to the Business of Data podcast. I'm your host, Catherine King, and it's a pleasure to have you join us today. In this series, we'll be speaking to senior data analytics leaders to share their experiences, challenges, and insights. Let's go ahead and dive straight into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Business of Data podcast. This week, we are talking about bringing everyone together, specifically how to unlock the power of people and data, creating a community approach to learning and support. Now, I am extremely excited that I managed to carve out some time with the fantastic and fabulous Mayze, who is the Global Head of Data and AI for WPP. Now, I'm sure most of you would have seen her speaking at one of our various events, or you've come across her in the conference world. But if you haven't, just a few intro facts for you about Di. Now, Di is in fact WPP's first ever global head of data and AI and began her role at the start of this year. Now, previous to WPP, Di has worked at a number of brands, including Mediacom, Acceleration, and Boots. So some nice big brands in there. Now, if you can't find Di at work, you'll find her taking part in some sort of crazy fun activity like laughing yoga, circus skills, or maybe even on a kayak on the way to the pub, which I'm told is in fact an organised activity, which sounds like great fun. Di, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Well, as is the bod pod tradition, as we all know by now, we're way into season 2. We know how this runs. Nosy question in first, and I can't scroll past this, can I? Laughing yoga sounds like great fun, and just circus. It all seems a bit random, Di. I'm not going to lie, it seems a bit random. What do you enjoy most about these sorts of activities?
I've got a group of friends that we just pick each crazy activities for each other to do, so it's almost become a dare. But I will say to anyone who is missing a laugh, laughter yoga is so much fun. I even looked up trying to be a qualified laughter yoga teacher, because we lay on the floor, when we could meet up, obviously, but we lay on the floor of Clapham Common in a circle, all our heads together. And the last bit of the session, we just had to laugh, and we just, properly laughed till it hurt. So I think it's good to get out of comfort zone and do some of this really weird stuff.
Absolutely. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love doing these podcasts because not only do I get to dive into some really interesting topics, I get to find out more about the fantastic thought leaders that we get to work with. And I've never had a conversation about laughing yoga, let alone in a work environment. So, we're setting a precedent here for the podcast, I feel, and we're going to have a really great episode. So thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. Now, as I said there in the introduction, you are in fact WPP's first ever global head of data and AI. What was WPP's data situation like before you joined? What did you walk into?
Right, so if for people who don't know WPP or have heard of it, not quite sure. So there are 100,000 people in WPP. 1 in 4 ads. Some people have rounded it up to 1 in 3. So let's go halfway between those two. Ads are created by WPP. So we have hundreds of agencies in over 100 markets working across creative, media and experience. So data was federated. It still is, and I'm cool with that. But there's a lot of people in a lot of places. So I've spent a lot of time doing discovery, really. I'm looking for pockets of talent and great stories, whatever I do. But there's a lot to uncover.
Super fantastic. Now, as I said, so you walked through the door, well, just about walked through the door, because you started in, was it January or February this year?
It was January, yeah.
so you walked through the door just, and you are the first in this role. So has that meant you've been able to put your own interpretation as to what that means? Because you haven't had that chance that people have had and seen this position before, so they know what to expect or have a set of expectations. So were you able to kind of put your own stamp on it?
Oh yeah, it's been my dream role, actually. And in most of my career, I've been the first person in the role. And I think it's because I like to make roles that suit me and suit my skills. So other people who would have got this role may have had more of a structured tech leaning. So I suspect there'd be a whole group of people who'd be looking to build a centralized data lake or start some big data structure projects, centralizing stuff. For me, I absolutely believe in people, and the power is in the application of what this great people do to the data rather than the data itself. So I've been able to carve out my dream job because I've just made it about data people and us investing in people over data, and empowering people and agencies to share, to be proud of their work, and giving them a stage to promote the stuff that they're really proud of.
I mean, it's such a positive thing, because when I, whether it's my own ignorance, but when you think of really large companies, and I think it's fair to say WPP is a very large company, you often think that kind of what's the way it's said is the way it goes, and that there's no real movement. But it's really fantastic to hear that actually you did have the flexibility to really harness how you wanted to do it, and be able to move forward with that. I think it's quite positive. I mean, in a previous episode of the Bob Pod, we were talking about careers and getting into it. So it's quite a nice positive advertisement, really, that WPP has kind of let you take the reins of that role.
I'm really proud, and I'm really, work for really great people who believe in me and what we're doing, and are fully behind, the mission of data for good and responsible AI, and taking care of our people and upskilling everyone. And there's a lot of attention and support for it. And I think particularly with the year that we've had, putting people around the center of your data strategy is definitely the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And let's dive into that a bit more, the year we've had. So when you walked through those doors on your first day, I'm going to bet my bottom dollar that you didn't expect the year in front of you that we've had. So, starting a brand new role hasn't been done before. There's no real kind of road ahead that's mapped out for you. You're doing all of that for yourself. I mean, doing that ahead of a global pandemic must have been extremely challenging. What did your first, say, 90 days in this brand new role look like?
So I always believe in the power of three. People can remember three things. So I started to bucket our priorities into three things. And the first one is centered around a stat from Gartner, who I quote all the time, and that's they predict by 2022, 80% of data lake projects will have failed because curating and inventorying data is so hard. Yeah. So I hired a global head of data management who's totally awesome, and he and I have been building out a catalog, which is it's a crowdsourced thing. So we share licenses with our agencies, but we say, come on, you add your data, you tell us how you're using it, and then we can continue to support it. So that's the first one. And to just share a story about curating data, I love all data. Some of the data in there I think probably isn't as useful as it might be. And I was demoing the catalogue to one of the agencies, and I said, okay, my favorite data set is a velociraptor data set that you could put in your postcode and it will give you the chances of being killed by a velociraptor. And I said, well, obviously it's totally useless, but it should foster some creative thinking and showing people that we're having fun with data. And he turned around and he went, oh wow, that's amazing, we're working with Jurassic Park right now, that's a brilliant data set for us that I never would have thought about. So really engaging people on thinking differently about what data sets could be blended to create new insights. And then the second one, which I'm sure we'll talk about at length, is our enablement program. So a lot of time spent on training. We have an AI academy where we've committed to training 5,000 data scientists, and a Demystify AI program where we're upskilling 50,000 of our colleagues. And then the third bucket, to go back to your intro, is about communities and content. So bringing people together and sharing content. So those are my first three. And actually, they've been a really good anchor for me during the pandemic, because I can always go back to, as the inbox gets busy and the diary gets busy, am I doing one of those three things?
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And I love that idea of thinking outside the box with your data, and actually, being brave enough to suggest those sorts of things, because I suppose there is a risk that it could go two ways, where it's either that's fantastic or have you lost the plot, why are we talking about dinosaurs? And I think it's really fantastic you took that risk, because it sounds like it really did pay off. Now, as you say, one of the main things you've been focusing on is bringing many data teams across I think it's 400 plus agencies under WPP's umbrella together. How have you been tackling that huge challenge?
So I get asked a lot, on what other people are doing, and I'm about to build this. Has somebody already done it? So in July this year, we launched our data and AI community. We already have 2,700 active members internally. So really want to make sure everyone feels included, and it's an inclusive thing. So there's no such thing as a stupid question. People email me and say, Di, do you mind if I post this on the community? I was like, don't you dare ask me permission. It's our community.
Yeah.
I might be its biggest cheerleader, but it's not for me, it's for everyone. And we've had talks. In fact, I'm hosting one this afternoon where somebody wrote to me and said, we're really proud of the reporting solution we've built. Can we share it with everybody? We've got hundreds of people have accepted that invite. We've done 350 people attended our last panel on what's life past third-party cookies. And there's a real breadth of skills, I guess, from people wanting just to learn more about data to scientists who are sharing code, thinking how you might answer some particular challenges. So it's a lot of energy, and anybody looking to set up a community, I will say you need to probably, however much time you've allocated, times that by 10. But that's been really rewarding, and I get so much feedback which makes it all worthwhile to say, I didn't know there were so many people. I haven't seen so much collaboration. You've given us a way to collaborate across agencies, across markets. Even, our agencies are all global, so even different markets within the same agency now have a platform where they can share and collaborate.
Absolutely. Now, what's so funny to me, working in the events industry, I mean, I know obviously what we've seen this year has been a complete transformation, but kind of a traditional events approach. I fully understand and appreciate the power of networking and sharing ideas. It's our bread and butter. And what makes me laugh is it's so simple, but obviously, as you say, it's so massive, and it's not simple at all. But the premise of it, of just sharing ideas and saying, hey, this is a case study we've been working on, and actually that all wouldn't have happened without this community base. So I think it's really, really interesting to actually see all the innovation that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for just someone saying, hey, we're doing this right now, does anyone want to get involved, or does anyone want to see? And that thought sharing, because very often, and it makes me laugh that you say there's no such thing as a stupid question, because something that was always drummed into me at university was, if you're thinking of a question, chances are 3 other people in the room are also thinking of that question as well. And it's very similar with I'm sure, with projects and challenges that actually across the 400 plus agencies that you have, chances are someone else is working through that problem or has worked through it. So that kind of thought sharing is very interesting. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong with this, but you've set up a CDO group specifically within this as well, haven't you? And that one meets every 2 months, is it?
Yes, so the CDOGs, 88 members. Again, a mix of disciplines. So there are some of our most talented data scientists, but also data strategists and creative data people. And we've just had our second one, and I try and make sure it's slightly different from the community events, because this is about getting sponsorship, making sure that they know that their people have got licenses for Coursera as part of our AI Academy. Please give your people space and time. But we have more specific cases where we share stories, we share capability. One of the case studies that we shared in the last one, 2 other agencies came to me and said, oh, that's so brilliant. I didn't know that existed. I've been trying to set that up, and now, let's just work together. So that is just, it makes me really happy, and people really appreciate it, and that they get to meet their peers. And it can be quite isolating if you're in a chief data officer in a market that maybe have quite a small data team, but now people can navigate across discipline, across market, and across agency.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Now, I know you said there that whatever time you've allotted to a community like this, times it by 10. And I always, it's one of the things I always like to try and do with these podcasts is offer listeners and audience members a chance to gain advice from the fantastic thought leaders that I have. So what would be the advice that you'd give to someone when it comes to setting up a group like this from scratch? Because, from what you've said, you've had your second meeting and you've already had some fantastic outcomes. So what's the advice you'd give to setting something like that up?
So, I mean, it's a Billy basic, but be clear on the purpose and what the boundaries are. And there's a lot of admin in setting this up, because inviting people, I mean, I did a search on LinkedIn and on an internal directory of people who had data in their title, then realized, as is always the way, the data quality wasn't quite, because lots of people who don't have data in their title. Yeah. So gathering people to invite, and then I found some friendlies. So we have about 15 data champions that I asked to work with us so that they will help get interest in their agency. They will help drive up users. They will help post content, because what I didn't want it to be was me posting content every day and nobody else feeling part of it. So and I really wanted it to grow organically. So we've had 2 sub communities grow out of it. One of them, someone said, can I set up a data visualization group? Should I set it up outside this? And we've said, no, please keep it in. So we don't want to control any of the content, but making sure that people don't then set up a million other different communities.
Yeah, that's then the risk, isn't it? Because you can go down so many kind of subgroups from just kind of data analytics. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just amazing how many different ways it can go. And like I said, because we've got creative, media and experience agencies, people all have slightly different lens on what their data challenges might be or how they're working with data with clients. But making it feel that everyone's welcome, and really, really encouraging people to say, tell your friends, tell your colleagues.
Yeah.
And we ask for feedback constantly. We do a review of what great topics have been talked about, and we share that at the end of each month. So, I mean, it's a lot of people who work on the community to make it look this easy and low maintenance.
Fantastic. Now you've spoken through kind of organically some of the challenges that you've experienced, and what sticks out for me is that person emailing you saying, can I post this? And that almost expected gatekeeping, I think, especially over the last, say, 5 years. I'm thinking like LinkedIn groups, there's often rules within those. There's often kind of criteria for different meetings. So how have you kind of overcome that to the point that you aren't the only person posting in creating content? How have you generated that confidence, I suppose, for people to get involved?
So there's very little gatekeeping. I mean, we do just make sure that all client confidentiality is adhered to, which hasn't been an issue at all, because everybody knows not to break any confidences, but I make sure every post gets a response in some way, and it's often me tagging other people who may not have spotted it. Okay. And we've had an example this morning. Someone said, oh, do you know how you could visualize this? And I said, don't ask me, please ask the community and tag these 2 people who are setting up the data visualization. Yeah. And they've immediately come back. So I don't edit anything. I sometimes even myself wonder, oh, this is an article I think is interesting, but is it data or is it not?
Yeah.
So I try, and it was one that was an app that was a running app that they'd gamified it so that you could pretend you were being chased by zombies or that you were running into a mountain. I thought, actually, I think the community will quite like that, but it's not really data. But I try and make sure it is around work related in some way. But we are a creative transformation company, so we have quite a lot of artistic license around that. But I try and make sure it sticks to topic wherever possible.
Absolutely. And often it does tend to be, obviously we started out with laughing yoga, which is probably quite an extreme example, but generally speaking, companies and organizations and departments attract like-minded people. So chances are, if you find that gamification quite interesting, obviously on one hand, from your data experience, the way they've done that is very interesting, but also just because you found it funny, chances are someone else will have as well, because you do tend to attract the same sort of people who have the same values and kind of ideas around it.
And we know data folks have a weird sense of humor. I mean, in my chief data officer group, I said to everyone, we're not going to do a round table intro because that will take half the meeting. So could you just introduce yourself in the chat? And data jokes were appearing, which were obviously terrible. But yes, same kind of values and sense of humor.
Absolutely. So obviously you started this role in 2020. So I think it's a fair assumption to say most of this community work has been done virtually. Have there been any new opportunities that you've seen because this has happened in 2020 that perhaps wouldn't have been explored if remote working and, you know, all the things that we've undergone this year hadn't been kind of the norm?
I think it's a really good question, because I think we would have tried to meet in person and then maybe had that slightly awkward hybrid model where we let people dial in. And I don't think that vibe works as well. I mean, I've had it on calls before where people have forgotten I'm on the call and they were meeting in real life and just leave me there on the phone while they've all left. And I love the fact that everyone's welcome, any market. I mean, time zones with APAC is a bit of a challenge, but we've been able to create a global community that everyone feels like they've got a voice and a place. Whereas if it was mainly London on US time with some other people able to dial in, I just don't think it'd have the same vibe.
And I suppose because you've started out virtually, there's going to be ways that, you know, when whatever date that may be, when things do return to some sort of normal and people are out and about a bit more, I suppose because you have such a strong foundation where you are generating such a community culture within the data culture, that actually perhaps that will translate better when there's a hybrid, because you won't forget about Di on the phone, because there's going to be a Zoom call that's going to be projected, because more people are going to be involved. So hopefully some of those kind of key learnings and culture will translate a bit better than, say, for example, if this period of time hadn't have happened and you know, you'd started in a physical world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move forward, because I'm very conscious of the time. It always moves far too fast for my liking. So in terms of lessons learned, in your experience, what would you say are the greatest data opportunities for marketing and advertising companies today, and how can they overcome the challenges that they may face as they work towards these goals?
So I think two big opportunities and challenges associated. So the first one is data literacy, and the second one is ethics and responsible AI. So just to talk about data literacy, I mean, there's a lot of conversations about what it means. If you look at literal definition of literacy, it's about understanding words, and data literacy therefore would be about understanding data. And I have a slightly broader view, because I think it doesn't have to mean data scientists or sophisticated analytics. I think improving the data literacy of everybody, not just within WPP, but we have a responsibility to society too, and we work with partners on making sure we improve the data literacy. But to go back to one of my first comments about us training 50,000 of our colleagues, so that is a massive opportunity for us to upskill everybody, and it's people, it is everybody. It can be people who don't touch data, who don't like numbers, but actually everybody needs to be able to, I think, especially given this weird time and the whole load of rubbish charts and insights and rubbish stats that's been out, I think giving people a chance to and the confidence to challenge, no, that's a small sample size, that's a rubbish percentage, that chart you've deliberately color coded that to make it look like a different story. All of these things that we've seen all the way through, I think data literacy is a massive opportunity. And we try and find interesting ways to engage people who maybe would normally think data is really boring and that robots were going to take our jobs. So we've partnered with Territory Studio, which is a visual effects company, and we've used blockbuster film footage to dispel some of the Hollywood myths about AI versus the reality. And we've partnered with the Open Data Institute to do some data fundamentals training, and it's all around our data philosophy and our case studies. So we've really made it relevant and brought it in to people's worlds. And last one, which we've just launched, which I love, is we've partnered with Synthesia, which is an AI generated video company. So we've got AI training our people on AI, and we've asked 20 questions like, does WPP do AI? Does WPP have AI ethics? What is the role of AI in consumer packaged goods? And people can they get a personalized video that's tailored to their name and their market, and it's in English, Spanish or Mandarin. So we've really tried to make sure there's something for everybody in upskilling and improving the data literacy, as well as training our most talented data scientists a bit more.
Absolutely.
And then the second one on AI ethics, we're doing a huge amount of work on getting guidelines and principles and the role of transparency, explainability, accountability, reminding people that humans are the ones that are accountable. It's not the machines. Machines and algorithms got a really hard time with A levels recently, and often the machines get blamed, but let's just remember it's a human that is doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Now, we only have a few moments left, and there was one final area I wanted to kind of pick your brains further on, Di. Now, a few weeks ago, last month, in fact, you used your CDAO Europe Live presentation to make some pretty bold calls about the future of data and analytics, and your points about sustainability were particularly interesting. I was very, very lucky that I got to host that session with you. And I wondered if you could just recount those for our listeners who perhaps didn't get a chance to tune in to the conference.
Yes, I will do. I love this. So this was part of a Data 2030 paper that we wrote, just trying to predict the future in a world when we can't predict next week. Let's look further ahead. So sustainability is a really interesting thing that I think people will talk about much more, because it's easy to think in the past, let's collect every bit of data we possibly can. There's been very much a volume brag. I've got 20 billion rows of this. I know all of this, but people need to remember that data consumption is energy consumption. Those two are directly linked, and that is going to have a cost to our planet and the environment. And the IDC predicts that by 2025, 175 zettabytes, now we're on to a new word because we've grown out of all the others, of data will be collected, compared with 33 zettabytes in 2018. So this volume is going to be huge, and as individuals we've got a responsibility. The predictions are that we'll still be allowed to take photos on our camera and on our phones, but that again is using up a huge amount of energy as we're taking that. So I think corporations will take more responsibility. I do even think we'll have some sustainability taxes coming. I think a load of companies will then turbocharge their data minimization strategy, and it will be part of their being carbon neutral plans, which a lot of companies have. They will need to think about the servers that they've got, and just because they're in the cloud doesn't mean they don't count. And I think there'll be a lot of let's have less data.
Fantastic. Now, CDOs are incredibly busy. So realistically, when do you think sustainability concerns will start to creep up their agenda in terms of kind of time frame, I suppose?
I mean, I put this in for 2030, but it will happen a lot before then, because we know curating, processing, keeping data clean, it's expensive, but how brilliant to think, actually, not only do I not want to invest in this anymore, I don't want to have such personal data about my customers. They don't want it. I can't justify its use. Actually, because of contextual targeting and other things that are available, you maybe don't need it. It's not to say you don't need first party data, but I think people will just think in the next couple of years, let's stop investing in all of this data that we don't need.
Super. And then my last question to you, Di, to round off what has been an absolutely fantastic conversation, is if there was one piece of advice or one takeaway from this podcast episode that you'd love the audience to just take with them back to the office, they could be driving in their car, they could be on their lunch break listening to this, what would that one piece of advice or key takeaway be?
Find a data story that you love and share it. I try and find one every week. I challenge myself to read weird blogs and stories so that I can try and engage non-data people and try and teach people one thing that they didn't know. And I don't mean in a literal, here's a data process, but just data stories, data quirks that people didn't know. So I think to be curious and read, there's lots of very strange blogs out there, people doing brilliant things with data. So go forage.
Fantastic. Now, I don't know whether this counts as a rather strange podcast. I'll leave that up to the audience to let us know.
It is.
But they might tick it off. We've spoken about dinosaurs and all sorts, so I feel like we're in the running for that title.
I hope so.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Catherine. It's really fun.
I absolutely love catching up with Di. She's always so full of passion and always has an interesting story to tell. Never did I think that the words laughing, yoga or pterodactyl would feature on the Bod Pod, but here we are. What a great episode. As always, make sure you're subscribed to the Business of Data platform to be first in line to receive our thought-leading insights and content. And if you're not already, do be sure to follow us on socials as well. You'll get the chance to chat with your fellow thought leaders as well as receive notifications on the latest content. As always, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time.